Hey everyone.
Hello.
So thanks for coming back here for this roundtable discussion on Indigenous health and colonization and how colonization affected our health. So yeah, the one thing I was thinking about, I was thinking about my own family and how diabetes runs through it so much, and so I do have to pay attention to my diet as well, quite keenly because of it being in my family. So I was kind of wondering, like, how much of this is genetic, how much of this isn't, and definitely when it comes to the Indigenous population, the more I read about it, the more the huge thing that stands out is just the change in diet, and how, before the Indigenous way of living was much more connected to a balanced way of life and diet, so hunting and growing foods that were healthy and not using, sugar, flour, processed foods. But of course, since, I think over time when that good land was taken away and other new ways of eating and doing things were forced upon them, they had to change everything. So they were forced to, eat the more processed foods, and that's all that's affordable anyway, right?
So is that what got you interested in trying to get more information? Was it your own personal health was affected? Or?
Yeah, well, actually, my grandparents and aunts and uncles, and even my sister at birth, they were saying she could have a propensity towards it. And I know for myself, like, just my eating habits really, like, my intake of sugar is very, it just affects my health a lot. So I have to be careful. So I just have blood sugar issues sometimes. So then I thought, well, is this a genetic thing? And I did some research, and it did say there is a genetic component, just this thrifty gene that creates greater fat storage to get through winter, to get through longer periods without food. But when we have access to sort of high calorie, low nutrient foods, and we eat those, our body just like stores it all up.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if back then they would be working so hard on the land and being outdoors and everything was physical, but now our lifestyle isn't like that. So it's not like the fat stores getting used, it's just staying there.
The different animals that they ate as well too, all wild animals, it's all lean, there's nothing in there. They had berries, so if they had any, it was all natural sugars from the berries. The maple was, a source of something that was great for them that wasn't high in sugar and whatnot too. So I think that has a big part on not being able to do the ways that they do things traditionally anymore. So
right. And the other thing too, like when I was doing some reading on this, it was saying that the Indigenous people on reserves tended to have higher rates of diabetes compared to the ones off reserve. So I think there could be a lack of access to healthcare on the reserves as well, and that can influence things like, they're maybe having more wellness programs and things like that would help, and just greater access to healthier food, I think would be key, like to not be forced to have to buy, craft dinner or, just the processed stuff all the time, because it's all that is affordable.
Yeah,
right? So
everything's really expensive.
Yeah.
And
regular testing is key too.
What
regular
is
testing, going in for regular testings, and I feel that in reserves they just don't have amenities for it. Most hospitals are pretty far out, so people are not going to want to go take the travel out there. Plus, most people don't drive, so getting out to have these testings is causing higher rates as well.
The other thing I noticed too was there's a higher rates now of gestational diabetes, as well as it being found more in young children, and so that creates a higher risk of complications as well. So the earlier you're diagnosed, the higher chance of complications. And I was kind of appalled at the amount of complications seen in the Indigenous populations. So 60% of patients were found to have at least one major complication, like renal failure or an amputation, because there's a lack of circulation that goes to the extremities. So it's pretty severe and kind of scary when it's like an epidemic. And why isn't it being treated as such? Like, why isn't it being taken care of? Why aren't, health officials taking steps? That's what concerns me.
It almost seems like it's a big major disease portion that's taking over, kind of like it would be like back in the day, smallpox and fever, black fever or whatever, wiped a lot of the native population out. This is what it seems like to me is almost like
it was like brought in from the Europeans. They brought in their ways of doing things and the types of foods that they ate, like the white flour and sugar and all that came in, and and it's not appropriate. It's not good, healthy food. So
I feel like the government, because it is so much targeted in the Indigenous population rather than the general population, that they just don't pay attention. The funding isn't there. But if this was happening to 80% of women in the general population, I bet there would be a lot more funding.
There would be huge funding, media coverage.
It
would be night and day.
Yeah.
Honestly speaking.
Yeah.
Even the strips now, they've just said that the strips are, it's not covered anymore, and it was like, so how do you expect us to, how do they expect them to test their blood if you're not going to be able to provide them with the strips now as well? Right. So, but again, if it was anywhere else, they'd be giving it to them constantly all the time. Here you go. Here's these clinics. Come grab them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's absolutely upsetting.
Yeah, so I was, trying to find that ray of hope, and I did find something about, I don't know what it's called there. It's called the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative, which started in 1999. So it was a bunch of funding, $58 million over 5 years. And so basically what they were trying to do, getting the Indigenous communities to develop their own approaches and sort of wellness programs for their communities, to involve walking clubs, weight loss groups, diabetes workshops, fitness classes, community kitchens, community gardens, and healthy school food policies. And they supported traditional activities such as traditional food harvesting and preparation, canoeing, drumming, dancing, and traditional games. So I think there's this effort. I'm hopeful about that effort to sort of bring in some of this new old traditions coming back into the community. So, yeah.
That's great. Absolutely. I think along the same lines as he was talking about health and your health and wellness, that kind of goes hand in hand, in my opinion, just with getting the knowledge about Indigenous suicide and just trying to really wrap our heads around it fully. I know that, the media have their about having suicide awareness, but not specific, because even here in town you have a Team 55 initiative where a high school student had taken his life, and so they, these parents, and it's just a huge positive step us towards trying to help towards suicide awareness and mental health issues. But then when I look at the Indigenous population, which has a suicide rate from ages 15 to 24, which is 5 to 6 times higher than the actual national average, to me says you need to have a higher awareness, even still. Yes, we're getting there as to realize, that suicide, it touches everybody. But then when you think about it and realize the Indigenous population is 5 to 6 times higher than national average, is that we really, this is a huge problem. And if the general public would attack that with the vigor that it needs to, for instance, like Bell Let's Talk, they flood the airwaves, whether it's news, social media, whichever, about Bell Let's Talk for that one particular day, which is fantastic.
But that's just one day.
That's one day. That's one day, and then think about it: 5 to 6 times higher than a national average.
So what do they think is the cause of that being so much higher?
It's colonization from, you've got mental health issues, you have alcoholism, drugs, addiction, being isolated on your reserves without, as we've already mentioned, the proper medical entities there to help you. So there's this large sense of hopelessness and loss.
Yeah, I saw on the news when they were showing scenes from the Attawapiskat suicide crisis that like even all the houses were just
Overcrowded.
shacks and like things that I would expect to see in third world countries, not Canada, but yet here they are, and like I could see how that would just have such an impact on like your sense of wellness and the
What
fact that
future?
people care about you. Your
What future do you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That lack of that isolation factor and lack of community activities and recreation and just those things that like keep life going and keep your mental health positive, right? That's lacking, and especially in those harsh climates like Attawapiskat and just any in the northern communities, you're always under environmental stresses that do influence your state of well-being.
Yes.
And never mind all the other, like the living conditions, the lack of community and connection and feeling a part of something and belonging to something. And that's where I think traditional, like connecting to traditions can help, or even just anything that connects people together, like I said, recreation and things like that, access.
With the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau went to Attawapiskat, and he stayed there for the weekend to see what the conditions and everything were like. And I found it quite weird because I was like, well, he went there, and then he was able to get back into his fancy jet and then get away and just not even think about it anymore. But while he was there, he's seen that despite all of this, some of the people did have that connection because, you know what, they were trying to get over the fact of, like, what can we do about it? Many families are living together in homes and decrepitly falling apart homes. Most reserves don't have running water for them to be able to drink. So any normal person who would go through these social determinants of health, I guess, would not, how would you function, you know? So when you look at it in that aspect of it, of like, well, what do you expect these people to do? Some reserves don't have, because of the time, like they have darkness all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine living in darkness all day with nothing to do?
No.
So that definitely has a sense
Totally.
on the mental health
Absolutely.
of like, you know, well, this is not the kind of life I want, yet they can't get out and get away, and most of them don't want to leave. That's their home, that's their area.
Yes.
Regardless of they're not leaving that place. So
Mhm.
that has a lot to do with the suicide rates of like, well, you know, I can't take it anymore.
That's right.
And I think that a lot of the awareness is there for a second. When that little girl, only 10 years old, committed suicide. Like,
Yes.
where at 10 years old did we think when we were 10 years old that, well, oh my gosh, it's so bad, I gotta commit suicide? You know, the mental state that's out there. They're not getting the proper help. They're not getting counseling services. There's just no money.
And it's
allocate
nothing
for them.
long term. Like you saw on the news, they sent up social workers and counselors for
A lot short
a
period of
couple
time.
of weeks, and they did them in rotations as well. So I know, like building that bond with your therapist is such an intricate and intrinsic part of being able to work towards healing. But when you have like just this rotation of different people who don't know your problems, they don't understand your issues, then how is that supposed to help
That's
people?
Being
It does more harm, maybe.
you know, part of counseling is so much about trust and how you're supposed to build trust when counselors are coming and going. Considering and then the history that you would have with the trust factor, and then having people come and go, it will never be built. Not in that aspect, especially when it's so needed in a crisis area such as that.
Yeah.
And with people not, the counselors going in there are actually doing more harm than they are good because they don't have the sense of the traditions behind things and how to culturally get in there and do things properly. So,
Yeah, but
I mean,
coming from
it's-
an outside perspective,
Yes.
as an outsider, coming in temporarily and like
Mhm.
Justin Trudeau can just go back to their
Yeah.
homes. How is that helping? Like it's kind of a nasty band-aid effect.
Yes.
'Cause it's like you're putting on, ripping it off, putting on, ripping it off.
Yeah.
And you know that the counselors they truly want to help,
oh yes.
but they haven't been given the tools and the necessary knowledge of the area and the people and the traditions to truly do their job.
The mandate's wrong.
Yes.
Just that's what it
It
comes
is,
down to.
yeah.
Even if they wanted to help, they're not given the opportunity to do so
I agree.
effectively.
Agreed.
And I think that works, but then that also ties into the addictions that are going on in the reserve. So there's so many different determinants of health that is becoming a widespread issue that nobody knows about, like diabetes, suicides. alcoholism, drug addiction. So, reserves are having to find a way to cope because they don't have that. So by turning to alcohol, it's just becoming a way of shutting out everything else that's going on. If they're going to have no other choice but to be in that situation, then they turn to the alcoholism. So that becomes a snowball effect of how you grow up. So, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, well, they drank, so now I'm going to drink. And then when they have kids, it's going to just continue on until somebody fully knows how to culturally get in there and explain and get down to the root cause of things. Drug addictions are getting more populated out on reserves. Like it was alcohol, and now it's becoming an opioid addiction. It's just becoming widespread, and it's just such a sad thing to see somebody want to be out of it so bad of oblivion to not be in the situation that they're in. Of again, no housing, very low housing, no incomes, no rates of anything, no community sense, and the love and the part of community because, like I know that for my family, hugging and is not a form of, most westernized families. It's all about, hey, come sit in my lap, let me tell you a story. It's all love, and that's not how it is with us. It's basically like get out there and go do some work and get doing this, and it's a snowball thing. So,
So you're saying like that people use drugs and alcohol as a way of coping with what they've been given and what they've been through. Well?
Yeah, because like for some people, like residential schools, like it bases up to like the grandparents of them having to go through the horrific situation with residential schools. Colonized to say, do you want to be Native or do you not want to be Native? We'll give you this offering of help if you want it. However, you've got to denounce your status and come over to us. And, when you're like, imagine being in that situation of like, what are you going to do? You're solely strong, which there were those strong people that did that. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm sticking through. And then the other people are just allowed to provide for my family. So, okay, if you want, where do I sign? I'll denounce if you want me to. And so going through that whole thing of the identity of not really knowing who you are, dealing with the results of the residential schools. The 60 scoop was a big, huge thing because you're, again, not with your family. So you go away, you go with a totally different family. Most of the times these families were Caucasian families. It wasn't unheard of, but it was definitely leaving the reserve to go elsewhere. So as you're growing up, because you're just a child when you go through this, and as you're growing up, you know that there's a difference. There's something like we're the same, but we're not the same, So then as that goes on, it's just they finally decide, okay, we're going to go back home to our reserve. Then that whole thing just starts happening again. So the alcohol is a gateway to be able to escape the effects of colonization and, the intergenerational trauma that they have. So
I see that, and I think about how there's that loss of sense of self and your community and just your culture. And again, that's why I see like the boys and girls taking their lives because what is there? They're a close-knit community, but at the same time, they're looking around themselves and they're seeing just the dysfunction in their own families, and they're saying, is this what I have to look forward to? And it's just, it breaks my heart.
And the system makes it so, that is what you have to look forward to, and that's the sad thing, is the systemic discrimination is so big that it's a big hurdle to actually try to jump over, and you're not given the strength to do it.
And it's blatant if you wish to actually look at it.
Yeah. I mean, that, like, this ties in so much with what I'm learning in school right now. Like, we're learning all about the prison system. And, like, I was learning that Indigenous people are so highly represented in the prison population. I mean, like, I learned that Indigenous people are about 4% of the Canadian population, but are almost half of the prison population, which, like, blows my mind. And, like, I think it comes down to all of these things, like the systemic racism and discrimination that Indigenous people face in Canadian culture, but a lot of the other problems as well, it stem from all the way back from colonization and to the 60 scoop in the residential schools, causing all of these problems that leads them to end up in the prison system. And we're not doing anything to stop that from happening.
Yes, I agree. It's funny how we like to believe up in Canada that we're so much more advanced than they are down in the United States.
So multicultural.
Whereas they're doing the exact same thing to African Americans down there. A small percentage of their population is African American, but yet over half of their prison population is full of this. And there's been documentaries done on this, on Netflix and what have you. But we're up here in Canada, we're like, oh, la, 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 la. It's like,
we're doing the exact same thing.
Completely silent. We're doing the exact same thing. It's just, again, it's blatant if you're willing to open your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to combat the prison problem is going back to address the roots of the issue and help heal from there before it gets to the point of prison, because like prison creates so many more problems for the individual. Like trying to find employment after you've been in jail is impossible, and then you combine that with the racism that already exists. Like I would hate to think what your opportunities would be after experiencing that, and that would cause you to have to turn back to a life of crime just to provide for your family and stay alive.
And what does the imprisonment do to families as well? Like,
Yeah.
how are they coping when, you know, it's dad's in prison or mom's in prison or however it is?
It's cousins.
Yeah, just a complete obliteration of of the child's social system and supports.
The things that you had said, like the numbers are absolutely staggering on the population. But again, I mean, I feel like, what are they doing while these people are in the prison system? Are they incorporating any rehabilitation areas to say, okay, like let's get you back to the old ways of traditional teachings while they're in there, showing them the ways that, you know, so that when they do get released back out, they have that knowledge to be able to take it back home and start incorporating programs there.
Yeah.
So instead, they just put them aside, like, oh, they're not, you know, it's a problem, it's a problem.
And the other piece too, I just feel like a lot of Indigenous communities are pushing for self-governance so that they can decide how to, in a way, deal with crime in their own ways. And why not? Like, why do we have to impose this, you know, our way of doing things when there have been efforts in the past where they've figured out how to do proper healing with somebody who'd committed a crime, and proper punishment and proper healing and how to deal with it, and it's shown to be more effective.
It worked then.
Just throw them in jail.
But again, westernization of everything, of like, oh, just throw them in jail and it's not our problem anymore. But then completely complain and bicker about how, well, you know, we've got to feed, we've got to clothe, you got to clothe, really? What do you clothe? It's a suit that everybody wears, and so I don't get that at all.
You can't say the dominant culture's way is working, because it clearly is not based on the numbers. Clearly.
Good points, everybody.
Yeah.
Great discussion. So, yeah, if anyone has any other comments, maybe we'll just close for today and we'll come back another time for the next subject.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So we got plenty of that.
Do you think the volume is okay? Or are we too quiet?
Yeah.
No, I think